In February 1977, the Chonburi fish farm was established. Today, it is one of the biggest fisheries in Southeast Asia, selling a significant percentage of fish consumed in the whole of eastern Thailand. But that wasn't always the case. Nung Adoyadej was born in rural Chonburi, the illegitimate son of a local dentist. He had to fend for himself out on the streets, surviving on meagre scraps. When he was 15, he found himself working at the Chonburi fish farm, which had just opened up shop. He found that he was good at the job and was very soon promoted to managing the farm. And while he was good at the menial tasks that came from working at a fish farm, such as cleaning the fish cages, he found that he had an eye for profit. Managing and making more and more money, the fish farm grew in size and production increased. Unfortunately, his boss passed away from cancer a few years later, with no descendants, leaving the entire business to Nung. And slowly, bit by bit, Nung grew the fish farm larger every day, until it became the massive powerhouse Chonburi fish farms, where you just got your delicious pladuk fafet, deep-fried catfish, and many more Thai dishes from. But this story isn't about him. Enter Noom Chai Channa, unluckiest man in the world. He was born into a happy middle-class family, which soon lost large portions of their money after the bank they put all their money into was found guilty of money laundering and was shut down. When he was 4, the apartment he and his family stayed in was destroyed by a freak earthquake. When he was 12, he had to sit an important exam, but one of his papers was lost and he had to retake that exam. On his 18th birthday, he tried to get a driving license, but ended up failing thrice in a row from various unforeseen circumstances. And that's discounting all the minor inconveniences his bad luck had brought him in his day-to-day life for the past 27 years. Despite all the hardships they've been through, his faith never waned, and through bad luck he kept fighting it all, pushing forward even when he felt the universe was out to destroy him. It was even how he met his wife, Fa. For years, he had been chasing the girl who lived next door to him, but was rejected in front of a lot of people in a park, leaving him in tears. Another woman comforted him, and about 2 years later, they fell in love and got married. As of now, things seem to be going well for Noom, who is just about to be welcoming his first child. He and his closest friend from childhood, Yok, both found jobs at the Chonburi fish farm. Their pay was bad, worse than the jobs that had rejected them, and their workload was crippling, feeding the fish, draining and cleaning the tanks and filters, repairing the nets, and everything else that came with the job, rinse and repeat, for all 7 days of the week, from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening. To make matters worse, Mr. Adoyadej was a slave driver. Despite his initial start in poverty, he most certainly did not sympathise with the struggles of any of his workers. They were seen as little more than cheap labour, expendable and easily replaced. "This filter is not going to clean itself. Stop idling and clean it now," Mr. Adoyadej, or as he was known as Fisan, would often yell. "Fish are brainless, but even they aren't as brainless as you." A year ago, a worker was seriously injured in an accident, and although the human resources paid the farm a visit, Mr. Adoyadej lied through his teeth and got off with little more than a slap on the wrist. Still, the workers fought through their tyrannical boss and harsh working conditions. Now it was one warm afternoon. Noom and Yok sat on a platform, square enclosures filled with fish of all kinds around them. 5 grueling hours working in the early morning sun, and a scolding from the boss, and they were glad to be able to finally eat lunch. Fa had made Noom his favourite dish, tom yum. "I wish that Fi-san wasn't our boss," Noom sighed, frustrated. Yok nodded as he opened a can of spicy noodles. Noom squatted, but promptly slipped over a puddle, and unluckily, his can of tom yum fell from his hands and into one of the endless squares of fish nearby. "That was the second time this week," he muttered to himself angrily. Oh, it was also Tuesday, the second day of the week. He sat down in disappointment and murmured something about his bad luck, but little would he know, his luck was about to change. "I'll buy you one of the meals from the market," Yok volunteered, heading towards the boats. Noom could only look on as a horde of tilapia swarmed the bits and pieces of the tom yum floating in the water. Oh, how good it looked! The fish certainly enjoyed it. And then he saw something odd. Something he hadn't seen before. The tilapia were leaving. All at once they abandoned the feast, swimming back into the depths, leaving only one or two to peck at the remainder of the tom yum. "What the heck?" Noom murmured, confused. A large shape emerged from the depths now, a glorious shimmering fish unlike any Noom had ever seen before, and he considered himself an expert on fish. The massive fish opened its mouth and devoured the remains of his meal, and some of the fish in one gulp. "Greetings, young man," the fish spoke, its lips moving. Its wondrous scales glimmered more magnificently under the sun. "To what may I owe the pleasure?" Hello?" Noom replied, terrified. Is this real?" "What you see before you is indeed real," boomed the fish. "I am the blessing fish, and you have given me an offering." "I have? No, you must be thinking of someone else. Perhaps Yok," quavered Noom. "No," the blessing fish shook its head, squirting Noom with more water. "You have offered me, the blessing fish, delicious tom yum, and for your offering I shall reward you. What do you desire?" What are you?" he stuttered. "I just told you. I am the blessing fish, and you have offered me a gift." The fish repeated louder this time. "What do you so desire? But remember this, your offering is directly proportional to what you wish for." "I wish for my boss to disappear," Noom said with a smile. "Your wish is my command," the fish smiled. A great light began to appear, glowing from within the belly of the beast, and travelled up and out of its mouth, until it landed on the ground. The fish nodded. "Go on, eat the light." Noom looked at the shining sphere in confusion, which reeked of rotten fish. "Are you not hearing me, boy?" the fish growled. "Eat the light before your wish goes stale." Noom gingerly picked the light up, and reluctantly did as the fish commanded, stuffing the small ball of light into his mouth and swallowing it down. It didn't taste as bad as it had smelled, and even reminded him of fast cooking. "So?" Noom asked, finishing the rest of the light. "Is he gone or, dead?" "Be not afraid, for he will not be your boss any longer," the blessing fish responded. Noom watched as the fish nodded, turned, and returned to the depths from which it had come from. Noom looked over when the fish had finally vanished, and saw nothing but tilapias. It was gone. Shortly afterwards, Noom could hear noise from afar. He ran over to one of his friends and asked him what was going on. "Just watch," one of them cried, being hardly able to control his laughter. Mr. Adulyadej was having human resources inspectors. "Many people have gotten food poisoning from eating at restaurants and stalls which your farm supply to," the first inspector rasped. "Your facility has violated several health and safety rules, not only for the people who eat the fish, but for the workers too," the other challenged. "Is it true that you have workers clean the filters without any safety harnesses?" "What rubbish!" Mr. Adulyadej fumed, throwing his arms up in the air. "Don't believe the rubbish those good-for-nothing doers tell you." Mr. Adulyadej looked exactly like a boy being scolded by his parents. They could barely keep their serious expressions there. Smiles started forming on some of their faces. "Because of your negligence, Somsak Myuu was injured last year, and the fact that you didn't pay any compensation to him for his injury." Who are you talking about?" Enough with the lies, the inspector shouted. Many violations of safety, poor sanitation. We'll have to shut your fishery down, the second inspector declared. And that's exactly what they did. The closing of the Chonburi fish farm caused a nationwide outcry, and restaurants and eateries all had to turn to other suppliers. But soon, the fish farm was back up and running. Mr. Adoyadej was now out of a job and experiencing what his workers felt. The evening later, Noon went home to his run-down apartment and Far gave him a big hug. "I saw the news of the fish farm," she said. "How did they find out about your boss and what he did?" she asked. "If I told you, you would never believe me," Noon chuckled. "How now?" "Don't worry, my love. I'll figure something out," he assured. A week or so passed and Noon kept thinking about the blessing fish, the mysterious creature which had netted him all of his luck. Very soon, the fish reappeared, this time early in the morning, when Noon was going to the market. "How are things going on for you?" the fish's voice boomed, taking Noon by surprise. "I'm happy," Noon replied. "So you really are real. It wasn't all a dream." "No," the fish nodded. "Your wish was fulfilled." What exactly are you?" Noom asked, for the first time realizing he had no idea what it was. He thought about it a few times, sure, but not what exactly it was. "I am the blessing fish," the creature simply stated. Noom looked on, unsatisfied. The fish laughed and continued. "Many moons ago, I was a man just like you, before your civilization even took shape. I was king of this land, but I was cruel and bloodthirsty. I conquered and killed anyone who stood in my way." "Oh?" "One day, I led my soldiers into battle against Burma. However, we got ambushed and they killed almost all of my men. I tried to escape, but they captured me," the fish explained. "They executed my men by elephant, but when they came to me, they dragged me aside. A shaman then began chanting in a language even older than me, and I was transformed into this." "That's sad. Do not feel pity for me. I was cursed to help the common man, those whom I had stomped on the most. To restore me to my human form, I am to complete 1,200 wishes, only 700, which I have completed over the ages," the fish clarified. "I have served kings and queens and so much more. I've been an ally and an enemy. I am the god of wisdom and of greed. I am many things, but first and foremost I am the blessing fish," Noom finished, rolling his eyes. The fish nodded. "How can I help?" "I wish for a better job for myself and my friend Jock." With that, Noom threw a variety of fruit into the water, and the fish leapt out of the water, catching the fruit mid-air. Once again, Noom had to eat the sphere, and his wish was granted. The next day, feeling very inspired, Noom and Yok embarked on their new business venture, a small and humble street food stall named N&Y's. With their delicious cooking, people swiftly fell in love with their cooking, and within a month or so, people from around the whole province, and even the odd tourist, all came to eat. Neither knew where their new cooking skills had come from, though Noom was sure it was the blessing fish's actions. The two embraced it well. The first day, a well-known Malaysian influencer on vacation was passing by and tried their food, recommending it on her YouTube. Like moths to a flame, they were swarmed the coming weeks with an armada of people just begging to try their food. Noom and Yok hired several people, and strangely enough, all who joined almost magically found an eye for cooking, accounting, or serving. Even the poor street boy who never knew how to cook, to ex-convicts who only knew crime. Anyone was welcome to join the N&Y's family. All who worked for them prospered. Business was booming. Vast amounts of hungry mouths went every day and night. They eventually grew from a smaller hawker stall to renting a space for a full-on restaurant. Noom and Yok were already dreaming of turning N&Y's into a franchise. Imagine their excitement when a successful restaurateur from Bangkok paid a visit. Noom and Yok worked up and down to butter her up with their signature chicken satay and a heap of other delights. All of the staff watched her eat in anticipation and fear. The fate of their restaurant was on her tongue. "This food," she began, "is some of the best I've ever eaten in my whole life." The staff all cheered in unison. "I must tell you two this," she said. "I have a spare space in Central World that was one of my restaurants, and I would love to rent this place to you two, with a fee of course, but I'm sure you two will be able to handle it." "This will change our lives," Yok exclaimed on, tears of joy rolling down his eyes. He grabbed Noom and the two hugged each other. Noom especially felt so, and he was choked up with emotion that his life was finally going well. "We can finally be rich. All that we dreamed of is within our grasp," Noom shouted in response, and quieter, remembering the blessing fish in his mind, he whispered, "And you have me to thank for it." "Why would I thank you?" Yok asked, looking at him weirdly. Noom laughed it off, forgetting that Yok didn't know a thing about the blessing fish. "I just wanted to see how you'd react if I said that," Noom lied. "Just a joke." Yok gave him a weird look, but laughed anyway. Noom said goodbye to Far and he and Yok set off to Bangkok, the big city. And at first, things went well. The second restaurant boomed, and their collected income skyrocketed as soon as it opened. But then, a strange thing happened. The strange talents that had come to those who had joined began to gradually disappear. They were still there, but not as much as they were before. It was like the talents from their first restaurant were now split in two, half remaining at the first, and another half at Bangkok. Their profits waned and returned from the sky-high earnings to what they had earned before. To make matters worse, a new restaurant from across the street called the Boiling Pig started flourishing in success. Its owner, a cantankerous old couple, earned the dislike from Noom. Noom was closing the restaurant for the night when he saw the old man and woman dumping their rubbish outside his restaurant, laughing at him. "Slow day, huh?" taunted the old man. "No one can stand a chance against the Boiling Pig." "See you when you close," the old woman snorted in laughter. The couple hopped into their car and drove off. "Those pigs," he thought to himself, picking up the rubbish. With his new restaurant hemorrhaging money, Noom decided that it was time to pay another visit to his old friend, the blessing fish. Arriving at the river, he summoned the fish over. "It's just that," he began. "Business hasn't been as fruitful as it once was. I thought you would bring prosperity to us." "Well," the fish replied, "you wished," and in a perfect mimicry of Noom's voice, "Wished for a better job for you and your friend Yok." "Yeah, so—" "The business will only work well in the hands of you two," clarified the mysterious fish. "Rest assured, your income will remain constant, at least in the grand scale of things." Noom nodded, understanding. "So, do you have anything more to wish for?" "I wish for—" Noom began, thinking hard. What was there to wish for? He had everything he needed. At least, he was content for what he had. A house? No. He'd just moved into one, and any bigger wasn't necessary. Money? The blessing fish had just promised him that his income would remain constant. He thought and thought, until he finally found something to wish for. "There's a restaurant opposite mine, the Boiling Pig," he began. "It's just opened, and it's driving some of our customers away, and its owners are the worst people in existence. With the bad news, I'm worried for our business. I know you said that our income will remain constant, but that's only if we work there, right?" "Indeed," boomed the fish. "Your terms were for a job. When you stop working and remain at home, the power of your restaurant will fade away. All those workers blessed by me will return to whence they came." "That means nothing," Noom said. "I have enough money now to hire better workers." The blessing fish laughed and nodded, agreeing. "So that is your wish?" the fish asked. "To close down the Boiling Pig?" "Yes," Noom smiled. "I wish for the Boiling Pig to close down." "Then bring me a pig," the blessing fish demanded. Noom suddenly realised he had forgotten to bring an offering. "The big one in the back of your rival restaurant, their mascot, if I remember correctly. Steal it from them and bring it here, so that I may be offered its flesh." The fish thought for a moment, and then burped up a syringe. Take it, to make things easier. Noom thanked the mystical entity and went off to steal the pig. It was already midnight, and the boiling pig was closed, and after picking the lock on the door, he had learned that as a kid, he entered the silent halls of the place. Noom looked for surveillance cameras, found none, and continued. He was wearing all black and a ski mask anyways. Continuing on, he opened the back door and found himself in a pigsty with a fat pig sleeping in mud. Armed with a syringe, he pounced upon the pig and jammed the needle into its neck, paralyzing it. And slowly, he dragged it all the way through the city into the beach, back where the blessing fish was waiting. "Good," the fish replied, licking its lips. "A worthy sacrifice." The pig woke up then, and seemed entranced. The blessing fish's eyes began to glow, and so did the pig's. The pig began to walk now, towards the fish. The giant fish opened its mouth, revealing thousands of deadly teeth. No, knives. Noom looked in confusion as he saw knives, not teeth, inside the mouth of the magic creature. The pig walked into the jaws of the beast, and the mouth closed. The pig let out a scream as the blessing fish began to chew on it, and swallowed. A moment later, the fish glowed bright and spat out a sphere of light that distinctly smelt and tasted like bacon. The next morning, when Noom came to work, there was shouting in the streets when the restaurant owners across the street returned to find their beloved mascot gone. Meanwhile, the boiling pig was having a slew of bad luck. Loyal customers began turning on the restaurant after that night, saying that the food now tasted horrible. Many staff complained that the old couple was treating them horribly and quit on the spot. Well, one night, the old man did see something. He stayed overnight to watch for the intruder, and he swore that a massive fish had floated in through the doors. Their money flew into its mouth, and he watched as it swam through the air into the pantry and devoured all their food. But of course, nobody believed him, and he was mocked by netizens and the public alike, and soon enough, the boiling pig went bankrupt. Although Noom felt bad for the old couple at first, he later decided that it was for the best. He had suffered in poverty growing up. Perhaps it was time for someone else to take the load. It was time for those who had trod over him to understand what he had been through. Noom let go of many of his cooks, now replaced with higher-grade members of the restaurant world. People with experience, people far more effective than what magic talents the blessing fish had given. Yok came to the restaurant an hour later, and he was surprised to see a cook outside crying. She told him everything that had happened, and Yok, concerned and raging mad at Noom, stormed into the kitchen. "What have you done?" he thundered. He looked around, confused to see the new army of staff. "An upgrade in business, Yok," Noom explained, trying to calm his raging friend down. "Quiet down, Yok. You're scaring everyone." "They were great workers, and we were doing a service to the community," Yok growled, not quieting down. "Nobody else is going to hire them." "Psh, I'm sure they can find new jobs now," Noom rebutted. "We gave them the credibility they needed, and if not, they can always go work at one of the fish farms out at sea. There's quite many of those willing to accept anyone." "Have you forgotten where we came from? Of everything we've been through together through Fisan?" he pleaded. "I haven't," Noom simply replied. "I'm making this better for us. This way, we're earning more money. Yok, I'm done working at this place, managing and helping out. I have a brand new team of people to do all this. And you should too, Yok. It's time to kick back, let the money flow in, and relax." Yok stormed off in a huff. The new cooks paused everything they did and stood there silent, some of them even feeling sorry for what had happened. "What are you all looking at?" Noom snarled at the cooks. "Get back to work." That was also the first time N and Y's got a bad review. 2 out of 5 stars. The food that was served at the restaurant had changed, and a local food vlogger commented that it tasted too bland, almost as if They had used frozen meals. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, but the first negative review stuck out like a sore thumb. Noom began to obsess about the review more and more every day. Far started feeling worried for him. "What's bothering you?" she would ask him. He pretended that everything was all right, but she could always sense when he felt troubled. And one day, he ended up asking the reviewer to come back, to try a second time. When the reviewer declined, he threw an expensive vase across the room, shattering it into pieces. "That was my grandma's!" Far screamed in anger. "We'll just get another one," he shouted back. "It was the last thing I have left of her!" She began bursting into tears. "Stop crying and clean it up now," shouted Noom. Still in tears, Far went to get a broom to clean up the shards of porcelain on the floor. The restaurant's stock dipped momentarily, and for the entire week it was lowered. Noom was distinctly irritable and sleepless. He began to suspect if things were really being managed well. He had trusted Jock, but now he was having second thoughts. Those thoughts went away once the stock went back up. The week after that, 3 waitstaff resigned from their jobs. They claimed they were overworked and underpaid. Noom had recently lowered the pay rate for the waitstaff and had also lengthened the working hours. But Noom didn't say any of that. He only saw a trio of insubordinate workers who could easily be replaced. This wasn't his fault. It was the waitstaff's. Maybe it's Yock's too. He couldn't keep the employees in check, clearly. The final straw was a surprise outbreak of food poisoning. It affected nearly all the restaurants in the town, but Noom felt personally attacked when he was told by food safety inspectors that he had to temporarily close it down. This is not profitable," Noom murmured, reading the news. He began to think now. Perhaps this was Yock's way of getting back to him, and for firing the previous cooks. "Perhaps you should spend some time off to cool your head," Far suggested. "Maybe you can go camping by the river with Yock like old times. I haven't been out in a while." "Maybe I will," Noom decided. "I have to get to the bottom of this mess." As much as Far wanted to come with them, she was too tired and went to sleep earlier. He went straight to his restaurant then, demanding to know what was going on. Yock was in the middle of closing things down when Noom entered. He looked older than when Noom had seen him last, and more tired. He was still clearly not working hard enough to keep the restaurant afloat, despite the fact the business had gone up more than 600% since they'd started. "You can't close down the restaurant," Noom yelled. Yock looked at him sadly and said, "We have to. We can't survive if everyone's getting sick. We need to let things calm for a bit, buy better supplies, and get things cleaned out." "Our supplies are fine," Noom snapped. "What matters is profit. We need to succeed while other businesses fail. We have to stay open." "I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you, but we simply can't," Yock sighed. "Nobody's going to want to eat if we don't solve this problem." Noom practically hissed at the news. He only heard the first half of what Yock had said. "Let's take a walk, Yock. Let's discuss this somewhere else. Maybe the river. It would do you well to remember where we came from, and that we need to succeed." Yock sighed and nodded. He told the workers to pause until he got back, and they walked off together. "Noom, I don't get it," Yock murmured, walking beside the river, watching it flow wildly, the water thrashing against the rocks. It was a pretty windy night, with a light drizzle. "Something's changed about you." "Nothing's changed, Yock," Noom replied. "I've always stayed the same. I think it's you who's changed. You care too much about other things. You need to go back to our roots and focus on living a good life for yourself." "What are you talking about?" Yock questioned. "I've always sympathised to the worker. I've always wanted our class to succeed. Everyone deserves a bit of good." "Whatever, Yock. You're the one sabotaging the restaurant," Noom growled. The two stopped in their tracks down, right on an old, rickety bridge above the rushing water. "What?" Yock snarled. "Me? Sabotaging the restaurant? If anything, it's you! You made things worse by firing your most loyal workers. You know what all your workers call you now." "What?" "Thigh Pret," Yock snapped. You've become just like the old Fai San back when we worked at the fish farm. Cruel, stingy, and evil. If anything, it's... Noom cut in before Yok could say anything. I wish that you were gone. I wish you wouldn't sabotage the restaurant. I deserve it all. I deserve to prosper. I deserve... With that, Noom pushed Yok into the river. Yok flailed and struggled to swim, but the current was too powerful, and he soon dipped underneath for the final time. Noom looked on for a while, thinking about what he had done, and after a while, he heard a familiar voice call his name, the blessing fish. Noom, what have you done? It inquired. He simply replied, I removed the last of the bad luck in my life. Then are my services to you fulfilled? Asked the fish, smiling. I may go on and help another. Indeed, Noom decided. You may go. Farewell. The blessing fish smiled and vanished, and then Zoom realized what he had done. No more wishes, no more solutions to endless problems. Wait! He cried out at the river, but it was too late. The fish was gone, and suddenly, as if it was a trick, Noom heard the sirens of a police car heading towards the river. He watched, confused, as a small squad of policemen ran towards the bridge, looking right at him. Noom Sarisawan, you are under arrest for the murder of Yok Chaichana, one of them shouted. They began to close in on Noom now. Noom sprinted across the bridge, but the police went at him, faster. Across the bridge there appeared two men, blocking the exit. There was nowhere for Noom to go now. Nowhere to go but over the river, just like Yok. And as the police converged upon him, Noom found himself climbing over the railing, and with a final look, jumped over, falling into the murky water, never to come up again. For a second, one of the policemen stopped and thought, had he seen a massive fish in the river swallow him up? No, surely not. It was finally over. A chef had sensed earlier something was wrong, and had followed the two out to the bridge. When Noom sent Yok tumbling over, he had gone straight to the police, and back to the bridge. Yok's body was found in the river a week later, but Noom's body was never found, lost to the raging river. Or perhaps the mysterious entity that called itself the Blessing Fish. Despite Far's best efforts to salvage her husband and friend's business, NNY's fell apart soon after. The recent events tanked its reputation, and things were back to the way they were before. With nothing left, she moved back to her home village to reunite with her parents. Any trace of the tale of Noom, Yok, and the Blessing Fish had been erased. Even the boiling pig had been restored to its original place under new management, and the Blessing Fish went on to serve another wish towards its freedom, perhaps more blessings to a new master.